Irony is the language of the internet. Without face-to-face interaction, the subtleties of human communication are quickly lost. Without any sense of tone inherent to plain text, it's a lot harder to extrapolate the intent behind a block of text versus even a voice message. Memes are used almost exclusively to poke fun, to ridicule, and to satirize pop culture or other people on the internet. And it's not just because the internet as a collective doesn't like something. Oftentimes it's actually a show of endearment. If something is widely beloved, then of course we have to make a meme out of it. If someone creates a meme that isn't based in irony, it's considered abnormal, subversive. We call it a wholesome meme or something like that. Sincere statements are often met with confusion or vitriol. Irony is how we express ourselves, it's just the standard. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with irony, when it's used to critique something anyway, but I think the way that we communicate on the internet and kind of society as a whole has become increasingly vapid and overwhelmingly negative. I also don't think memes, social media, or anything else I'm going to talk about in this video are inherently bad, and I don't want it to sound like this video is just going to be pure juvenoia the whole time. I actually like a lot of these things myself, but that's not the point. The point of this video is to shed light on the problems I think society has with irony, cynicism, and sincerity, and a good deal of this stems from, or is at least perpetuated by, the internet. So, I'm Sensitive Toad, and welcome to Sincerity in an Ironic World, or whatever I end up titling this video. Advertising is probably the easiest place to start when discussing the problem with irony. Sometime last year, my friend Samantha said something to me that really resonated with me, kind of kickstarted this whole video. Sincerity is the language of marketing. The point of marketing is, of course, to sell you things, so how to sell your product, your service, to as many people as possible. You focus on being sincere, you're authentic. We often see unknown actors in commercials portraying people of varying gender, age, race, etc. They're the everyman, they're relatable. They're supposed to be us. If a celebrity's in the commercial, they're doing something regular people do, almost subverting how the general public thinks of them. Regardless of whether it's an A-list celebrity or a commercial actor, though, they're selling you something. They're interacting with the product or the service, showing how useful it is. And ultimately, the people in the commercials just look happy. I want to be happy. You want to be happy. Why don't we check out what these happy, successful people are doing? Because clearly it's this product that's making them so happy. The thing is, we know how advertising works, and with no real way to do anything about it, we just become jaded to it. The thing about irony is it's really good at pointing out problems and the contradictions in things, but on its own, it doesn't offer any solutions. An ironic TV show talking about how it's just a stupid TV show might be novel at first, but once it's been done, we get it. It's fun to be meta, it's fun to poke at tropes, but it becomes so hollow immediately after. When it expands to ads, it's even more disconcerting. There's a period of time where even ads had to call attention to the fact that they were ads. Hey, I'm an actor in an advertisement. I'm trying to sell you something. I got paid to do this. I know you're a really intelligent, conscious consumer with a giant brain, and you would never fall for these marketing ploys. But now that we've leveled with you, we're authentic again, so you can trust us. Buy our product. The whole thing kind of just makes you feel terrible. You may fall for it for the first few times, but eventually you'll realize that the only reason they're calling attention to themselves is because they know that no matter what, they can still get away with it. You are powerless to do anything. You live in a world constantly surrounded by ads, no matter whether you want it or not. Being ironic was becoming trite, and with the realization that even though we understood the inherent manipulation and vapidness of the content, we couldn't do anything about it. Ads went to normal. Well, for the most part.
Jen, don't you want your mouth to like you?
Cut! Hey,
Yeah.
why is your aviation gin ad playing?
I bought mid-roll ad placement.
You bought an ad for your gin within an ad, for your movie within an ad for Samsung TV.
Yes. It felt like the right thing to do.
This kind of postmodern, self-referential meta ad was pretty well documented at the time. David Foster Wallace was a writer who was incredibly concerned with the increase of irony in our society. He mostly critiqued television and ads. Wallace passed away in 2008, however. While he may have been able to predict a lot of the postmodern trends that were happening and actively try to combat them with his New Sincerity literary movement, I really don't think he could have predicted memes and the way they're now starting to impact marketing. In 2018, Netflix teamed up with 4 Australian Twitch streamers to promote their new movie, Bird Box. Basically, the streamers would have to play video games that they liked blindfolded. A reference to the fact that in Bird Box the characters are blindfolded for most of the movie, because if they take off their blindfolds and see this scary monster, they kill themselves. I didn't see the movie. But anyway, that's all Netflix admitted it did. They admitted that they started the Bird Box challenge, but I think they did a lot more than that. It's pretty widely believed that all of the hype around Bird Box was entirely artificial. The movie quietly dropped on the streaming services on December 21st, which is an odd date for a horror movie on a streaming service. Its premise is also incredibly generic, and the movie as a whole, again, I haven't seen it, but I heard it was pretty mediocre. It wasn't very well received, and it's the kind of movie that probably would have done decent, if not flopped, at the box office with a traditional marketing campaign. But out of nowhere, these Bird Box memes started coming up, and they weren't even necessarily the Bird Box challenge where you had to do ordinary tasks blindfolded. Some of them were just people talking about the movie and making memes. Like, in the movie, the boy and girl are named Boy and Girl, and there's a reason for it, kind of. I'm not going to go into it, but obviously it makes for pretty goofy memes. So while we only know for a fact that Netflix created the Bird Box Challenge in the first place, we don't really know how else they had a hand in it. But I, and many other people on the internet, find it pretty hard to believe that this thing was entirely natural. It just does not make any sense. And considering that they had a hand in part of it, I really would not be surprised to find out that they either paid meme creators or created memes themselves, or somehow worked to shape this whole meme marketing into their favor. Because it did. Bird Box was a huge success. At least a much bigger success than it would have been if it just went straight to theaters. And if Netflix did it, who's to say other companies don't do it? And other companies do it. Think about a social media account for any fast food company. They're trying to be funny. Wendy's Twitter tells jokes. It's really goofy. It's absurd. Again, we understand the facade of the world presented to us, but we don't know what to do about it. Because even if we become conscious consumers, we're still consumers. You might be bothered by all of these things, how inherently manipulative advertising is, how inescapable it is, but you can't do anything about it, so why care? And maybe it doesn't bother you. I mean, after all, it's not hurting you, not actively, not obviously in any way, so why care? What can we do about it? It's just the way life is. Let's put a pin in that for now, and keep talking about the statement I mentioned earlier. Sincerity is the language of marketing. If we realize that marketing bad, and language of marketing sincere, it doesn't seem like a logical leap to say that sincerity bad. Of course, this is literally a fallacy, and the assumption it makes is completely wrong. However, its conclusion is one that a lot of people make but don't even know it. And I don't think it's this exact example that's prompting the idea that sincerity is bad. I don't think people seeing through the phoniness of media or ads that they find saccharine and overly sentimental is the sole cause for our distaste for sincerity, but it all kind of feeds into each other. We stigmatize kindness, honesty, and sincerity in our society. That may sound like an odd statement, but it's true. Sure, we learn about sharing and kindness and all that good stuff in elementary school, and we claim it's something we value in our society, but we really don't. Capitalism is an economic structure that guarantees that some people will be higher up than others. It's a system that by nature fosters incredibly unhealthy competition and social hierarchies. It's a system that gaslights the poor and convinces them that the reason they're poor is because they're not good enough to be rich. They're not working hard enough. They're not skilled enough. And one day, if they work hard enough, they too can be rich. They too can be the 1%. Right now, in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, we're seeing this system stretch to its limits, and all of its contradictions that are always true are even more apparent under pressure. Workers in so-called low-skilled jobs that work for minimum wage, or maybe slightly above that, are now viewed as absolutely essential. Unable to pay, people are calling for rent strikes and realizing the inherent maliciousness in rent-seeking. I'm getting a little off topic, but the point is, sincerity is incompatible with the systems we live under. They're also bad for a lot of other reasons. Capitalism in particular is incompatible with sincerity. Capitalism is the reason we have all these advertisements in the first place, and it's a system that props up other social hierarchies that are actively detrimental to our lives. The dissatisfaction of living under these oppressive systems and not knowing what to do about it is the kind of things that leads to, well, dissatisfaction, depression. I think it's one of the main reasons why a lot of millennial and Gen Z memes are so ironic and self-referential. Again, though, we know we're upset, and we sometimes might even know why, but we don't know what to do about it. So we make memes, we make ironic jokes about suicide, and call attention to the fact that we're in pain and won't actually address the core issues. We're ironic to draw attention to these issues, but irony is a dead end. Once we call attention to it, we have nowhere else to go. There's another really big power structure that discourages sincerity and therefore encourages irony: the patriarchy. If you're a guy, it's said you have to hold in your feelings in order to be tough. It's especially stigmatized to be sincere. You can see this really anywhere. We tell boys to stuff their emotions. It's weak for them to express themselves. We think that showing resilience is always the right thing to do. And it's always right to make it appear as issues in our lives don't faze us. It used to get called girly or gay, and it still does a lot of the time. But for the people who are aware enough to know that they can't use that regressive language anymore, but still don't understand the constriction of this gender norm and want to continue to put men down for it, they can just call boys and men weak. We often use the term toxic masculinity when the restrictive traits of masculinity cause men to act in a way that we deem toxic, a way that actively hurts others emotionally or physically. But the less talked about thing is that the patriarchy and gender norms of Western society are just as oppressive to men as they are to women. Men are often cited as being patronizing to women and will shrug it off as being chivalrous. Chivalrous. A lot of words and phrases in our vocabulary are laced with misogynistic coding, be it slurs or just words that refer to women as a commodity or a property. More dangerously, it can lead to violence against women and other marginalized groups they wish to feel superior towards for whatever reason. This is a dense topic, and I'm kind of brushing over it, not because I think it's unimportant. I think it's very important, but because I want to move on to the aspects of the conversation I think I can contribute to personally. Plenty of people have already approached this topic with a variety of lenses in a far more articulate way than I could here. So if you want a fantastic and comprehensive look at the subject of the state of masculinity and gender and how it affects men and women and just the crisis of masculinity that we have today, ContraPoint's made a fantastic video simply titled Men that I'll link in the description. So, back to the patriarchy. Men traditionally hold power in society and are also considered hierarchically superior to women even in the minutiae of things. Men are also traditionally considered to favor logic over emotions, and are encouraged and pressured, whether it's subconsciously or consciously, to stuff those emotions. The correlation is simple then. Sincerity is an emotional response, and big, strong men don't feel emotions. They do. It's a negative emotion expressed through their masculine strength, emotions that put down others and attempt to make themselves superior. It comes in the form of anger, of violence, of oppression. Happiness is allowed only if it's attained through these means. If it's attained by any other ways, it's not allowed to be expressed. Any emotions that aren't inherently bad, even really the neutral ones sometimes, are considered shameful and must be hidden. More so than this, it's considered intelligent to see past the facade of marketing. It gives you an advantage above others. So, therefore, it's logical and it's a man's thing. It's based on being rational. If you can see through the saccharine marketing, you're smart and good. But this thinking is wrong, and it makes sincerity the scapegoat. So hopefully you see the connection I'm making here and how sincerity is stuffed and we're told to repress it by pretty much every power structure that we live under. I think there's also a really interesting link here between the media we consume and how we interpret it. Like, why do we love cynical media so much, even if it's bad, when sincere media has a much harder time being accepted? If you like something dark, kinda grim, kinda edgy, it's considered cool. I mean, edgy is kind of a pejorative nowadays, and people don't really use it to mean cool. But I mean the cool edgy, like the cool edgy. Anyway, if you're a girl and you like this edgy media, you're even cooler. You're one of the boys now. You like the boy thing. You're smart because you can see past the phoniness that is other media. This edgy stuff, this is real. That girl stuff, garbage. It's fake. You don't like dumb media that isn't about real issues. This is real stuff. But what happens if a boy likes a work of art or a medium that's more concerned with being sincere, or is just more traditionally feminine and not associated with the aesthetics of cynicism or stoicism or violence or whatever boy is like? Well, he's a soft boy. He likes girly shit. Maybe he's gay. If you're male and you like something sincere, it has to be a guilty pleasure if you admit to liking it at all. You have to admit that the thing you like is actually bad, and you know that, but you like it beside that. But you know it's bad. If it sounds like I'm saying one of these examples is worse than the other, I'm not. Both of these are really terrible, and the boys actually always act really patronizing towards the girls in these situations. The genuine reaction of a lot of men when they find out that a girl likes video games, especially ones interested in violence, which is a thing boys are supposed to like, is surprise followed by a kind of obsessiveness. It seems like adoration, but without the respect. It's much more fanatical and patronizing. Again, I'm not saying either of these situations is better or worse. They're different, and I don't think playing the oppression game of who's more oppressed is a good thing to do. They're both very bad things. There's also the belief that said girl doesn't actually like video games or whatever it is. She's just doing it for attention. Regardless, liking the boy thing, especially as a girl, is considered the right thing to do. It's met with intense study and interest. But if a guy likes something that's traditionally feminine, it's met with intense and obviously negative reactions. Vitriol. Disgust. That's girly, that's gay, you can't like that. And we're a lot quicker as a society to talk about, say, a Joker versus just your average rom-com, because Joker's a serious movie about serious issues. Edginess, darkness, pessimism are all considered more worthwhile than kindness, sincerity, joy, compassion, by default. And this is wrong. The obvious point to make here is that expressing yourself is so stigmatized that it's actually braver to express yourself. So if we can call anything weak, it's keeping everything inside. That's me being cheeky. I don't think we should call that weak either. I mean, for obvious reasons, but being sincere is hard sometimes. Being yourself, being genuine is hard. And sometimes it seems as if sincerity as a whole has just died, has disappeared. But sincerity isn't dead, and it can't die. Sincerity is something baked into us as a people. We repress it as a society. It's evolutionary beneficial, it's primal, and it's the core of the human experience in a lot of ways, and proof that human beings are a lot better than our society leads us to believe. This doesn't mean that abolishing the patriarchy is the only way to bring back sincerity into the world with full force. As I've hopefully made it clear, every aspect of society feeds into this dissonance between who we are as people and who we're told we should be. We can also help to create better media and conversations where sincerity is the focus. When you create a more sincere world, you create a world where neither men or women have to put up with the societal pressures of outdated gender roles. It's all connected, and if you support kindness and sincerity, in a way, you support the dismantling of gender roles. You can tackle the establishment head on, but you can also just be sincere yourself. The last thing I want to talk about here is I want to do a deep dive into art and how it reflects our world back at us and how that relates to irony. I've been kind of poking at media and media analysis the whole time, but I really want to do a deeper dive into that, and I want to start with memes and how we communicate on the internet. Verbosity was huge in memes a few years back, and being overly verbose is still the punchline of a lot of memes today. I really enjoyed this development when it happened, mostly because I was a teenager who liked dumb memes. But I also saw it as a way to attack purple prose, which is probably my least favorite kind of writing, because it's annoying and pretentious. To a degree, I have seen a lot of discussion about the dismissal of movies or books that contain really obnoxious prose, and that excites me because I hate it. Overall, though, this dislike for pretentious things worries me a little bit. A lot of the people lobbying criticism of this overly flowery writing wherever it's found don't really seem to know the difference between something pretentious and something actually well written, maybe just kinda long and using somewhat esoteric words. Irony is often used as an attack on deep thinking and is often anti-intellectualism disguised as a joke. This just a joke phrase is a hand-wavy way of getting away with pretty much anything you say. It's how the alt-right communicates and indoctrinates. You can say something racist or homophobic, but as long as it's just a joke, you're safe. You have this layer of deniability. Again, I'm dumbing this down a lot, and I also don't mean to say that if you do this, you're automatically a member of the alt-right, but this is a legitimate tactic used by them. And link in the description for videos that go deeper on this topic because I personally think it's really important and just really fascinating. Sometimes, though, the purpose of irony in jokes or memes isn't always to hide disturbing dog whistles and radicalization attempts. The intent can be a lot less insidious, but still somewhat harmful. This just-a-joke mentality can hurt people. 2 years ago, and if you were active on the internet at this time, you'll definitely remember this. Millie Bobby Brown was at the peak of her Stranger Things fame, and she was in a lot of memes. Memes that featured violent homophobia. They were generally edited selfies of her meant to look like she was sending a Snapchat that contained absurdly homophobic comments. The joke was always in the extremity in the fact that it was coming from a 14-year-old. Again, I don't think these memes were meant to be hurtful or even as hateful as they seem. Some of them were even made by people who were at least claiming to be LGBTQ. But just because the intent isn't bad doesn't mean it's completely okay. These memes were so prominent that they drove Millie Bobby Brown off Twitter. Now, because I think this part's pretty easily understandable, and also because I want to move on to other topics, I'm going to make this brief. But it is really terrible that a 14-year-old who was already dealing with the inherent pressures of fame and the lack of privacy of being in the limelight at an age like this, it's really messed up that she had to deal with that. No doubt people who weren't as ironic or internet savvy thought some of these pictures were real at some point. Here's the thing though. These memes were funny to a lot of people. I found these memes really funny when I saw them. It was shock humor after all, it was just meant to shock, and it did. The jokes were so over the top they were clearly unbelievable, so I didn't think it would actually hurt anyone. But it did. It upset MBB so much that she was forced to get off Twitter. I did a lot of ironic things when I was a kid. I laughed at and made a lot of jokes that were ironic. You could be ironically racist and homophobic and all that, and it was funny. The people you were lampooning weren't the marginalized groups the jokes were about. It was the kinds of people who would make those jokes in the first place and genuinely believe them. It's the kind of premise that It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is made on. But, I would make those jokes in real life. I thought they were funny, and I didn't understand the problem with them. And while this is anecdotal, I know a lot of other people that did the same thing, and it's reached into their vocabulary, and it's done a lot of damage in that way. And I know a lot of kids that are still like that. But as I said earlier, it's hard, if not impossible, to tell whether these jokes are in fact just jokes or not. Especially when you can just hand wave it away whenever you want, and we're just supposed to take your word for it. And more than that, it's creating a space where people who do hold these values, in this case homophobia, feel comfortable. None of this is meant to be a complete condemnation of ironic memes, it's just an examination of how they can be used poorly. I don't personally find edgy humor as funny as I did when I was a teenager, but I don't think anyone who likes it is a bad person or anything. And while some subjects probably shouldn't be joked about by certain people, it's not a condemnation of ironic or edgy humor altogether. Sometimes jokes can just be jokes. It's just that, especially on the internet, the distinction can be hard to make. Anyway, beyond being used to hide actual hate speech and make edgy memes at the expense of a 14-year-old on Twitter, this kind of irony entering your rhetoric can be actually harmful to yourself. I think hurting other people, especially children, on the internet is reason enough to be careful with your speech, but it's important to talk about regardless. It can be detrimental to you. And I don't just mean you suffering the consequences of your actions for making an edgy joke and people being offended. In 2012, Rick Alverson wrote and directed a film called The Comedy, starring Tim Heidecker. It's about a guy who simply doesn't have a care in the world. He never opens up and is always joking. To put it simply, his ironic way of waving away everything in his life and never letting anything become serious to him leads him to be incredibly empty inside. Human beings are a pro-social species. We thrive on community, and even the most basic of relationships are important. When we close ourselves off from them, we live much more hollow lives. I think this is specifically a male issue going back to masculinity. For men, irony can be used as a force field to shield yourself from emotion the same way just closing yourself off can be. It's not just pretending you're stoic and strong all the time. It's not just making it seem like upsetting and traumatic events can't faze you. It's actively making it seem like you don't care about anything. I know The Comedy is just a movie. It has really no basis in real life as far as I can tell. But otherwise, the evidence I would only have is anecdotal. I know people like this, and if you don't, and you don't believe me, might not be enough for you, but I still think the movie's a really good example of how this kind of rhetoric can hurt you. As I said towards the beginning of the video, memes are just a common way of showing affection towards something, even if said thing has no inherent ironic value. I was surprised to find that Marriage Story was getting memed the hell out of, considering it's a movie about marriage and divorce, and there weren't any obvious flaws or weird aspects of it to be memed. It's a movie that's very sympathetic to its characters and is focused on being sincere without a hint of irony. All of Noah Baumbach's work is like this. But this movie in particular is interesting because the scene from it that was memed is one of the most emotionally potent in the movie. My worry here is that a movie like this, being as sympathetic as it is, clashes with the youth culture of everything being layered in sarcasm and meaninglessness, and we're left with a lot of people who don't know how to react other than making a meme out of it. Maybe I'm reading too much into it though. Maybe people just like making memes. I mean, I know that. I know that's a fact. Maybe it was just another marketing ploy. By Netflix. Irony extends beyond movies. I think you can also find it in music. So let's talk about the current state of hip-hop. A few years ago, trap was even more absurd than it maybe is now. It was a time where people were making fun of Gucci Gang and ironically joking that it was actually really intelligent and a comment on consumerism. People even ironically, but sometimes unironically, read into trap as Dadaist because of how absurd and seemingly meaningless it all is. I wouldn't really agree that trap rap is Dadaist. I mean, I kinda get it, but I do think it's reaching. Speaking of reaching, though, while I don't think it's Dadaist, I do think that the music of, say, Playboi Carti or Young Thug perfectly encapsulates the term post-ironic. So trap rap isn't Dadaist, but it is post-ironic sometimes, at least the way I see it. The way someone like Young Thug stretches his voice to its limits on Cartier Gucci Scarf, or makes a chorus entirely out of ad-libs on Kanye West, that's the name of the song, not the person, is so outside the typical realms of hip-hop that at first you might just want to laugh when you hear it. The first time I heard songs like Flatbed Freestyle by Playboi Carti, I was so stunned I didn't really know what to think. When I heard Harambe or the aforementioned Cartier Gucci Scarf, I literally started laughing. It's so silly and so fun, but it had a great flow and I wanted to rap along to it, but I was also laughing at it. And I feel like even if you're not really familiar with hip-hop, it's pretty obvious that this stuff is really weird. Young Thug isn't a bad artist. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's twisting his voice in all these strange ways on purpose to make fun, engaging music. Is being funny and strange just a side effect? Is it intended at all? I'm not entirely sure, and I don't know if the intent matters. For me and a lot of other people I know have the same experience with this music. At first it's kind of goofy, then you realize it kind of goes hard, and then it's both. I didn't really explain what post-ironic is yet. I'm going to explain it in more detail later, but it's pretty much this idea that something can be sincere and ironic at the same time. Another music example, pretty much anything under the PC Music label or similar acts. These artists like Dorian Electra or A.G. Cook take all these tropes of pop music and distort them until they're almost unrecognizable. Dials everything up to an extreme so much that it becomes abrasive. And in the case of an artist like Sophie or 100 Gex, the music does genuinely become noisy and industrial at times. It's hard to tell if it's a parody of pop music, a pastiche. It seems to love everything about the aesthetics of pop, even embracing the obviously trashy parts we'd rather forget about. The trends we look back on with disdain, the blatant consumerism and corporate image, the pitched up vocals, the shiny, robotic aesthetic that runs through a lot of A.G. Cook's instrumentals make it appear as if it's supposed to be a satirical take on how vapid pop can be. But at the same time, it's really catchy and fun music that seems to enjoy pop music. One of my favorite shows is the ongoing anime series JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. JoJo was one of the first pieces of art that introduced me to the idea of something being ironic, but also not ironic. It sounds a little silly in hindsight, but I didn't know there was a name for this concept at the time, and it thoroughly confused me. I felt really guilty for liking JoJo at first because a lot of its writing was really bad. The first season contains almost every tool for lazy writing under the sun. There's Deus Ex Machina, we have rushed character development, characters and arcs are completely thrown out entirely or just forgotten. Some of these things are even memes within the community. A lot of the fight scenes are so badass while being so goofy at the same time. There's times where a character's stuck in a tricky situation and you're waiting for them to pull a clever trick to get out, and what follows is the most convoluted logic that, even if you're not incredibly picky, it'll probably come off as a little forced, but somehow it works. It's still fun. Yeah, sometimes it falls on its face and the solution comes out of thin air and you feel cheated, but the tone of the show is so lighthearted that it almost always works. It almost always feels fun, even if it's unabashedly dumb. I was also really confused by the show's portrayals of masculinity. You have these big muscular dudes that are so absurdly large and stoic it feels like it has to be some sort of satire, but it's played straight. In fact, the show goes on to show a wide variety of men expressing their gender in androgynous or even overtly feminine ways. It's always treated as if this is perfectly normal. Now, the show's writing gets a lot better later on, and these changes to the masculine lens come with it. But it makes me wonder, did the show actually get better? Were these moments where I laughed at the show intentionally funny? Is a show progressive? Is it subversive? What's intentional? Was this all accidental? I never know whether I'm supposed to feel empowered and excited or when I'm supposed to laugh. I find myself laughing at JoJo a lot, especially in the early seasons like I mentioned earlier. But these goofy moments don't end. They happen less often maybe, but they don't end. I don't know if I'm laughing at how poor the writing is or if the show is having a laugh too. The show has scenes like this. But it also has some of the most touching portrayals of friendship I've ever seen. It has episodes that make me cry, that capture some of my favorite things about being alive and being human. As a whole, it reminds me of how much I love my friends and how grateful I am to be in this world, especially in hard times like these when it's kind of hard to see these things. It's kind of hard to remember why we like all these things in the first place. It's a weird show, and until I read the Wikipedia entry for Post-Irony, I didn't understand why I loved it so much and why it was so weird to me. Speaking of, the Wikipedia entry also has a great example of this phenomenon in film. Whereas in postmodern irony, something is meant to be cynically mocked and not taken seriously, and in New Sincerity, something is meant to be taken seriously or unironically, post-irony combines these two elements by either having something absurd taken seriously, or to be unclear as to whether something is meant to be ironic. One example given is the film The Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans, which, by the way, is the greatest movie name ever. The film contains what a Snakes on a Plane style irony fest should: hokey plot, bad acting, and deliciously over-the-top glorification of sex and drug use. But the film does much more than revel in its genre's campy history. The Bad Lieutenant is gorgeously shot and contains pervasive, incisive commentary on everything from race relations to police corruption and the definition of finding success in America. Matthew Collins, The Georgetown Voice. I love JoJo. I love all of this art. But even post-irony will never be as great as Sincerity by itself. I think there's a time and place for irony, and I see post-ironic works to be an attempt to grapple with the perceived absurdity and hollowness of the modern world. It's an internal struggle with the desire to be authentic and the need to reconcile with a lot of the ironic work we may feel guilty for enjoying. Irony is also great at pointing out contradictions, as I've said. The weird combination of irony and sincerity that is post-irony especially so. Post-ironic works seem to actually offer legitimate answers to the problems they point out much more than irony does by itself. The conclusion I came to with JoJo is that it uses irony to point out the dissonance between masculine tropes and the lives that men want to live when not being forced to perform traditional masculinity. The characters in the show express a healthy kind of masculinity that provides a comfortable experience for people of any gender or sexual orientation. The performances are one that open up space for queer masculinity and for healthy platonic relationships between genders. The show begins with a distorted view of masculinity with a somewhat queer lens, and goes on to become a show very comfortable with masculinity in whatever healthy manner it presents itself. And it does all this by twisting tropes related to tradition, be it in masculinity or in storytelling. There's a lot of other great examples of either sincerity or irony that I either couldn't fit into this video or I didn't want to make the video over long, so I just didn't put them in. So here's me talking about them briefly in quick succession before I close it out. I think our generation's fascination with so bad it's good movies is particularly interesting, but I think talking about that would be like beating a dead horse here. I myself saw The Room about a dozen times when I was a kid. I mean, I was 15, but I saw it in theaters a dozen times. I think Keanu Reeves being so adored and fascinating to the internet also says a lot. He seems to be a very humble and kind person and offers a sincerity that I think people admire and are maybe even a little confused by because they're not used to seeing it. I think the whole buff guys typing on laptop memes are actively challenging and deconstructing both memes and gender stereotypes for the sake of not only comedy, but being genuinely subversive and wholesome at times. And finally, I think kids shows that appeal to adults like Adventure Time or Steven Universe being as mainstream as they are is a really wonderful thing. I think kids and adults showing excitement towards immature interests in general, whether they're traditionally masculine or feminine, is a crucial step in eradicating the binary gender standards that we have ingrained in our heads. As I think the societal norms that deem something mature or immature is often as superficial as societal norms that deem something masculine or feminine. It's easy to be jaded. Life is hard. And I don't mean that as an annoying adage. I mean, life is really hard, especially right now. At the time I'm making this video, we're witnessing a pandemic the likes the modern world has never seen. Children are being born into this age of increasingly fast technological development and information overload. Climate change is an existential threat to every single living being on the planet. And all of the issues that existed before the modern era still exist. We still have millions of human beings without food, without shelter, without even the most basic needs. It's easy to feel guilty for wanting to seek out higher forms of living for yourself, especially when our political systems seem corrupted and broken, and we feel powerless to do anything about it. I don't want to fault anyone for being upset and confused and scared. The odds feel weighed against us at all times. But the world doesn't have to be this awful place for so many. If you want to fight for a better world and you just get tired and you can't do it anymore, you have to remember what we're fighting for. One of the amazing things about art is it can capture moments that aren't easily accessible, moments that are more rare maybe. I think this is one of the fascinations I have with it and why it's one of the things I talked about so much in this video. And times like this, we need to take breaks and enjoy ourselves. Being sincere is a political statement. Being kind is radical. The power structures that hang over us show the worst of humanity and discourage kindness. Our economic system inherently implies and perpetuates the belief that we aren't equal. The social hierarchies trap all of us into boxes, not letting us be anything that refuses to conform to their incredibly strict boundaries. It's easy to think that we're all just awful, that the way the world is and everything in it is just due to humans being bad, that all of this unkindness is just our fault. But that's not the case. We believe it because of how deep these lies are sown, but it's not true. People are capable of wonderful, incredible things. The actions of the few in power, the few with the money, the way they gaslight the working class is why we believe so low of people in the world. We are a kind and empathetic species at our best, and we are capable of our best. We can see in this tragedy moments of community, of people working together. While celebrities are online crying about being stuck in their mansions, the working class is taking care of their immunocompromised neighbors. People are demanding, and in some areas participating in, a rent strike. Better conditions for workers, the list goes on. We're seeing beautiful acts of solidarity that we sometimes think are impossible. Don't get bogged down in irony. Don't let the structures that perpetuate cruelty stand. Being kind is radical. Having hope is a radical act. We can change the world. We don't have to live under these oppressive systems. I know I'm simultaneously talking about the really intangible, somewhat abstract power structures that hang above us, and at the same time I'm talking about memes and anime. But it really is all connected. If you don't have to take direct action at the establishment above us, I hope you do, but you can just be sincere in your day-to-day life. Being sincere is a radical act, and it's a really brave act. We can change the world. Be kind, be empathetic, be sincere, be yourself. You and everyone else is capable of great things. Just be sincere. Hey everyone, thanks for making it to the end of the video. I didn't plan on making it this long until I uploaded a second video to this channel. The first one I uploaded was on February 3rd of 2020, and I wanted the next video to be about a month later on my birthday. One of the biggest things I was worried about was the fact that the world was changing so much, and this video might not really be relevant or even distasteful. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how it came out, and I hope you guys liked it too. So if you liked the video, please subscribe, maybe like and comment, and hit the bell to find out when I make future videos. I promise that going forward, the wait between videos will be a lot shorter. Anyway, thank you again, and have a lovely day.